Mass murder in Manhattan, a human tragedy of biblical proportions, killing, maiming, touching thousands in America and throughout the world. Locations Irish people know so well, the symbolic economic, political and military power centers of the United States. We trace the events of an awesome day, the likely criminals and probable effects. Prime time.
Well, as our coverage of today's tragic events in the United States continues throughout the night here on RTE1, a reminder that some of this evening's original programming can be seen at a later date. Largus returns next week at 7 o'clock, and we check in with the nurses this coming Thursday at 8:30. Also, tonight's Crime Line will be shown tomorrow night at 10:05. Tonight's edition of The View with John Kelly can be seen at 5 to 11 over on Network 2. Right now, though, here on 1, it's time for the main evening news with Anne Doyle.
Well, today we've had a national tragedy. 2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
One, then a second hijacked plane destroyed the buildings where thousands work. Over 100 stories high, the Twin Towers came down in clouds of smoke and fire. In Washington, the Pentagon itself came under attack from a third hijacked plane. Good evening and welcome. The United States is this evening trying to come to grips with a series of terrorist attacks which it's feared has claimed the lives of thousands of people. 3 planes were hijacked, then flown into both of the World Trade Center towers in New York and the Pentagon building in Washington. A 4th hijacked plane crashed in Pennsylvania. No group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. The Taoiseach and the Taoiseach have joined leaders around the world in condemning them. President Bush said the United States would hunt down and punish those responsible. He's meeting his national security advisors this evening. All American airports were closed down following the attacks and will remain closed tomorrow. The exact chronology of today's events is as follows. At about 10 to 9 New York time this morning, that's 10 to 2 Irish time, the first aircraft, United Airlines jet, crashed into one of the 2 towers of the World Trade Center. It sparked an explosion and sent huge poles of smoke into the sky. 18 minutes later, a smaller aircraft was then caught on camera flying directly into the second building, sparking an explosion and devastating the upper floors. 1 hour after the first attack on the World Trade Center, an American Airlines aircraft crashed into the Pentagon in Washington. A car bomb went off outside the building. The White House and the Capitol buildings were evacuated. Then, at 3 o'clock Irish time, an hour and 10 minutes after the first World Trade Center attack, a loud bang was heard and the first tower collapsed. Half an hour later, another explosion was heard and the second tower collapsed.
The first aircraft crashed into the World Trade Center building at 10 minutes to 9 local time as thousands of people were making their way to work. American television networks began broadcasting the scene live around the world. And 18 minutes later, the world watched as another airliner crashed into the second of the towers. One of the planes hijacked earlier was an American Airlines Boeing 767 en route from Boston to Los Angeles with 92 people on board. On the streets below, chaotic scenes of terror.
We just saw people falling, jumping out the window. So that's about it.
The buildings blazed for over an hour. Desperate and dying people hung from windows hundreds of feet high in the sky. Then at around 10 a.m. local time, the first of the World Trade Center towers collapsed. At 10:30, 1 hour and 40 minutes after the initial plane attack, the second of the World Trade Center towers crumbled.
We're going to be seeing some tape.
Around 50,000 people worked in the two Trade Center towers. 2,000 rescue workers tried, some in vain, to get near the scene. Firemen were choked and blinded by the dust and debris, which was likened to volcanic ash.
Big boom, come down the steps, everything fine till we got to the basement, and then everything just fell in. I got trapped under there when another guy crawled out, kept getting hit in the head, bags all around. Finally, we clawed our way out over the rubble.
Yeah.
Come on down. We did all right.
All right, way to be, Tom. Let's go.
1,500 members of the National Guard have been deployed, but hours later the scene remains chaotic. Hundreds of thousands of casualties still pouring into New York hospitals. Annette O'Donnell, RTE News.
And now with a report on what happened in Washington, here's Michael O'Kane.
Less than an hour after New York was attacked, a third commercial plane crashed into the Pentagon, which is the US Department of Defense. The five-sided building was severely damaged, rocking the nation's capital, closing down the federal government. The aircraft, apparently a deliberately diverted scheduled flight, sliced into the building at a time when the offices and corridors were bustling with people. Eyewitnesses said the plane appeared to accelerate as it approached the Pentagon, which was severely damaged. As the emergency services arrived, the injured were treated wherever they were found. Grey smoke rose high into the air as more than 20,000 civilians and military personnel were evacuated into nearby parking lots. President Bush was not in the capital. He cancelled his visit to Florida and travelled to Louisiana. Some people were understandably angry, others just prayed for the dead and injured.
I'm actually astonished, I'm scared to death, and I'm praying for all of us.
Terrible. Absolutely terrible. Not just for my convenience, but for probably the hundreds of people that have already died. It's shocking.
Frustrated with the country as a whole that we don't take a strong stand against terrorism. This had to happen. As long as we're going to let people off the hook in the Mideast, Iraq, Iran, and places like that, when they blow up buildings in Beirut and places like that, if we don't take a strong stand, this is going to continue.
The White House was evacuated, so too was Capitol Hill, with one congressman describing the attack as an act of war. Top government officials, including congressional leaders, cabinet members and the Chief Justice, were taken to secure locations to keep them from potential danger. A short time after the attack, military could be seen on the roof of the White House. As reports emerged, there was a second plane heading for Washington. F-16 fighter jets were scrambled, but fears of a second airstrike didn't materialise. Michael O'Kane, RTE News.
The attacks on the World Trade Center happened as thousands of people were on their way to work. Our reporter Ola O'Donnell has been listening to some of the eyewitnesses describe what happened.
Shocked and confused, New Yorkers could scarcely believe the scenes they witnessed on their way to work.
We heard a big bang, and then we saw smoke coming out, and everybody started running out, and we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people are jumping out the windows. Over there, they're jumping out the windows, I guess because they're trying to save themselves. I don't know.
It's just awful. It's incredible. It's just, I can't imagine how many people are dead. Just the most amazing situation. It's awful. I hope they can figure out a way to get to terrorists because it's got to stop.
We saw a few bodies, people just flying out the window. I saw at least four bodies coming through the window.
Everything came down, glass started popping, and people got hurt, stuff went on top of them, and it was a big explosion, and everything got dark, real dark, like snow. You can see behind me, oh, this is not snow, this is all from the building.
Around 50,000 people worked in the World Trade Center. This woman was on the 56th floor of one of the towers when the first plane crashed.
And as soon as she got hit, I was thrown to a window, so I was very lucky to get out. There's a lot of people that didn't get out. There's a lot of people coming down the stairs burnt up. It's bad.
Irish journalist Conor O'Cleary saw the second plane fly into the building.
It seemed so out of place because it was a passenger plane, and passenger planes do not fly near the World Trade Center. And it just smashed right into the World Trade Center, and a huge billow of smoke came out, and flame came out the other side, which means, I think, that the impact of the explosion went right through the building.
New York's Mayor, Rudy Giuliani, has ordered the lower part of Manhattan to be evacuated. This man probably summed up the feelings of most New York residents.
I'm in utter shock. I've never had a feeling in the city like this. Everybody is like frozen. I mean, this is like, if they can do this, what's next?
Orla O'Donnell, RTE News.
A fourth plane crashed near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and we're joined on the line now by journalist Roger McCoy of Clear Channel in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. He's been following events throughout the day, especially the crash of the plane in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. Roger, we have had very little information on this side of the Atlantic about the Pennsylvanian crash. Are we sure, first of all, that it was actually sabotage?
Well, we're pretty sure about that because someone on the plane had actually called what we call 911 here, which is our emergency service, and got Westmoreland County's 911 service. And they'd called from the plane, and they told them that the plane had been hijacked. This happened moments before it crashed here in Somerset.
What sort of terrain did the plane crash in, Roger? Is it a populous area?
Well, it flew right over a smaller town. I'd say maybe at the most 500 people live there, about 1,000 feet above them. A lot of eyewitnesses there had said that they had heard it roar over the town. It made a sudden 45-degree angle cut and then took a 45-degree angle into a strip mine area and just outside a recreational area called Indian Lake. No one was hurt. It crashed into almost like a field and part of the strip mine, and it left a 45-foot deep hole from what I understand.
Yes, we did have conflicting figures. Earlier we had a figure of perhaps 300 people on board that plane. But what is your latest information?
Our latest information is that that was a speculation, because from what we understand, now of course this is not set in stone, but from what we've heard is that it was 38 passengers. We had heard earlier from our Associated Press here that it had been, and from the United Airlines, that it had been 421. But according to the FBI, they had told us that it was 38.
And Roger, of course, we're very much in the realm of speculation, but I presume we can take it that the likelihood was that this plane was actually to be used as a weapon against another building in the same pattern as we saw with the other three planes.
Well, we aren't exactly sure what had happened. Our local area airports here, the Cambria County Airport, had been shut down. They knew the plane was coming in. They knew that someone was on it and hijacked it, and it came in above our airport about 6,000 feet. It went out over Somerset in what they would refer as a regular circling pattern for that airport, and it was coming back around when it crashed into the strip mines and the Indian Lake area.
And no doubt this event has caused just the same level of shock and distress in that quiet area as those that we saw in New York and at the Pentagon.
Well, in this area, it's one thing to hit New York City. It's another thing to hit the United States Capitol. But we're the heartland out here. We're more farming area. And to have something come in like that, and the only thing that we can think of, there is a factory here that does special technology for the U.S. military, but we thought it would be, when we heard about this, especially with the World Trade Center and then the Pentagon, we figured that it was more of a fear tactic and not a planned military target sort of thing. But it might have been, but if it was aimed at Johnstown, they missed the target by about 25 miles.
Roger McCoy, thank you for joining us from Pennsylvania.